Hey friends, welcome back to United Taste of America podcast featuring the best of the best in American cuisine from iHeart Podcast. I am Rick K. Jones, your tour guide and your host. As you know, we're traveling to each of the 50 states to showcase their unique culinary history, their iconic dishes, and some of their amazing restaurants. Today, Roll Tide. Okay, War Eagle, don't want to make anybody mad. We find ourselves in the great state of Alabama. Alabama is such an unusual state. It was a state with a lot of Native Americans. Again, we continuously talk about the fact that the Revolutionary War was fought because we did not want Americans to be able to settle. And Alabama was one of the last of the states to be settled because there were so many Native Americans, primarily the Creek Indians that had settled in Alabama, that it took a little while for Alabama. And that's why it is a little bit late in becoming a state, because it's state number 22. And so in many cases, it didn't have the population to justify it becoming a state from that standpoint. But what really changed the state of Alabama was when Andrew Jackson became president, and the Trail of Tears, where he migrated the Native Americans, again, largely Creeks and Cherokees, out of Alabama to Oklahoma Territory, and that opened up the door for settlement. Now, one of the interesting things about Alabama is it was originally settled by French in the Mobile region of Alabama. Everybody knows about Mardi Gras, and when you think about Mardi Gras, you always think about Louisiana, but the oldest Mardi Gras in America is where? It is in Mobile. They did it a few decades before they did it in New Orleans. And so Mobile was a great port city, largely French, and they had the first Mardi Gras. We record these way in advance, and so when they play, it's not always the time, but we have the season of Lent about to come up, where you have Mardi Gras, which is Fat Tuesday. It's the last night of sinning before you begin to repent and have 40 days of prayer and thought leading up to Easter. Now, what is Mardi Gras famous for from a commercial standpoint, or what? The beads. The beads originally were rosary beads. These are rosary beads. You were given the rosary beads on Tuesday night because you're going to bring them to Mass and repent on Wednesday morning, on Ash Wednesday, when they put the famous ashes on you. And so it's interesting how all this is sort of interconnected. Alabama, huge growth because of the railroads throughout the state, and they discovered iron ore. And so Birmingham is the Iron City. For years they called the Alabama-Auburn football game the Iron Bowl, because it was traditionally not played at Auburn or played at Alabama. It was played at the neutral site. Auburn said it was never a neutral site. It was too close to Tuscaloosa. But it was technically a neutral site at Legion Field in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was traditionally called the Iron Bowl because Birmingham was the Iron City. And Birmingham had a lot of steel mills and steel factories that led to a lot of stuff. So, interesting state. You've got the shipping industry, the port industry down in Mobile. You've got the Tennessee River that really runs all the way through Alabama on the way to Mobile. You've got the big city of Birmingham, where you had the steel industry. And then you had Huntsville. Huntsville's very interesting, the growth of Huntsville, in that we moved all these German scientists to New Mexico in the Second World War to build the bomb. They're working on nuclear fusion or other types of bombs. German scientists. They hated living in New Mexico. The topography didn't look familiar. They were homesick. We ended up finding a place in Huntsville, Alabama, in the foothills of the Appalachians that looks like Germany. And so Huntsville became the center of a lot of our nuclear research, but became, after that, one of the leading cities in the space race. And so Huntsville is about NASA, it's about space, it's about research, because the Germans liked the way the land looked. It's all about immigrants, it's all about topography, it's all about cuisine and these kinds of things in northern Alabama from that standpoint. Alabama really, was the heart of the Confederacy at one time, the first capital of the Confederate States of America was in Montgomery, later moved to Richmond, but started in Montgomery. After the war, very difficult civil rights times during the Jim Crow era. A lot of the more famous, or you could say infamous, incidents in the civil rights movement took place in Alabama. The bombing of the church where the little girls were killed in Birmingham, the march at Selma, the famous bridge, and the riots that broke out and the police brutality there. There is a very haunting memorial in Montgomery that basically is a memorial to the lynchings, the hangings that took place in the South during that terrible era. You need to go there and see this haunting memorial of the lynchings. It'll change your mind about a lot of things. But Alabama was part of that. George Wallace was the populist governor who later ran for president. He later kind of repented. He became more realizing that he'd been wrong. And late in his career, after he'd been shot, he got a lot of black votes because he, realized that things had changed. But what really helped change civil rights was college football. Alabama was always a great college football state, again with Alabama and Auburn. Coach Bryant, Bear Bryant, came out of Arkansas. He played at Alabama. He later coached a lot of different places. And then he said Mama called. He was invited to come back in the late 1950s to Alabama as the head football coach. He won numerous national championships. And he also helped integrate Southern football. And he did it by asking Southern Cal, his good friend John McKay, to bring his team to Legion Field in Birmingham to play against Alabama. And Southern Cal had some great African-American players led by running back Sam Cunningham. Ironically, Legion Field is in a black suburb or black region of Birmingham. And when Southern Cal came to play, most of the black kids and fans pulled for Southern Cal because they could relate to them. They had black players. And that night, Alabama lost 42-21. And Coach Bryant supposedly met John McKay, his good friend, at midfield after the game and said, "Thank you, John." He said, "What are you thanking me for? We just killed you." And he goes, No, trust me, thank you. Well, the next day, a bunch of Alabama fans got together and said, "We better get us some black players or we're never going to win another national championship." And the next year, Alabama recruited a kid from Arkansas, where Coach Bryant was from, Wilbur Jackson, whose mama was a school teacher. His daddy was superintendent of schools. And he was kind of a Jackie Robinson-type player that could take the racial abuse that he would get. But that integrated Southern football in a big way. Tennessee had integrated first, but Alabama was the big dog. And once they integrated and began to sign black players, it really changed the nature of the state. Alabama today is a state with a lot of agrarian, still a lot of crops grown there. It's a state with great Alabama seafood coming out of the Gulf. It's a state with a lot of industry. It's a state with banking. It's a state with major technology and research up in the Huntsville area. It's also a state with some great music. Florence, Alabama, Muscle Shoals, Alabama, great songs that were recorded there. We're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But it's a very interesting state. It's our 22nd state in the Union. There are lots of wonderful foods in Alabama. You know, one of my favorite dishes was supposedly invented in Alabama. It's called fried green tomatoes. You may remember the famous book by Fannie Flagg and the movie Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. Again, so many wonderful meat and three places throughout Alabama serve great fried green tomatoes. It's known for tomatoes. Great tomato state, vine-ripe tomatoes for tomato pie. My favorite tomato dish you can get in a lot of places in Alabama is just a good old-fashioned tomato sandwich. Sliced tomato, mayonnaise, salt and pepper, white bread, you know, fresh white bread that's just been baked. You want to, you know, put some lettuce on it, you can do that. I like to put cucumbers on mine. It's really, really, really good. We have a battle in our family between, do we use Duke's mayonnaise, which is made in South Carolina, or do we use Hellman's mayonnaise? I like Duke's mayonnaise on certain sandwiches better, but not on tomato sandwiches. On tomato sandwiches, I like Hellman's. That's just me. It's a peanut state. It's not as big a peanut state as Georgia, but it's especially southeastern part of the state of Alabama. They grow a lot of peanuts, and they have a lot of boiled peanut stands throughout the state. They grow a lot of okra in Alabama, and they're famous for their fried okra. They also are famous for barbecue, smoked meats like Conaca sausages that are made in Evergreen, Alabama. They're also known for wonderful desserts. The moon pie was actually invented in Alabama. It's now mass-produced in Tennessee and Chattanooga, but it was invented in Alabama. Pecan pie. The pecan is the designated state nut. I've been to Alabama. There are a lot of nuts, but the designated state nut is the pecan. I love pecan pie. Banana pudding. Banana pudding is a famous dessert throughout the South, but is really renowned in Alabama. And then there's a thing called the lane cake. Lane cake is a very famous cake. It's the state cake of the state of Alabama, a 4-layer white cake with bourbon spiked raisin filling. What book made lane cake famous? The great Harper Lee wrote To Kill a Mockingbird, and they talk about eating lane cake in that classic book, which is maybe my favorite book of all time, To Kill a Mockingbird, the late great Harper Lee. I mentioned Gulf seafood earlier. Alabama has a very narrow coast. It's only about 8 miles long, Orange Beach, Gulf Shores. But a lot of fishing boats come in and out of that area into the Gulf. And one of their most famous seafood dishes is royal red shrimp. Royal red shrimp are almost are sweet like lobster, that kind of meat, deep, and so they have to be frozen immediately. They come out of the deep waters of the Gulf. It's a deep water sweet crustacean. But if you talk about Alabama, you got to talk about barbecue. It really is one of the great barbecue states. You've got places like Dreamland Barbecue or Saul's or Carlisle's or Full Moon or Down South Barbecue. Almost every small town in the state of Alabama has a great barbecue restaurant. And then the big cities like Birmingham and Mobile and Montgomery and Huntsville, Florence, they all have great barbecue. But there's one really special and unique barbecue place in Alabama where they invented what is known as the Alabama original white sauce. It's barbecue chicken with Alabama white sauce. It's Big Bob Gibson's barbecue in Decatur, Alabama, which is in the northern part of the state, in the middle part of the state. It's over 100 years ago. If you've been cooking barbecue for over 100 years, you're doing something right. Bob Gibson worked on the railroad. He worked on the L&N Railroad, but he liked to cook barbecue for his family and his friends on the weekends. He dug his own pit, and everybody said to him, "You ought to sell this barbecue, Bob. This stuff is unbelievable." So starting in 1925, he started serving and selling barbecue from just a table made of oak planks nailed to a large sycamore tree in his backyard. And so you show up in his backyard, and he'll take the barbecue from a hand-dug pit. People could smell the barbecue. They could see the barbecue. And that was his advertising. His advertising was the smoke and the smell. Now, they don't call him Big Bob for no reason. I mean, he was a big man, and as the people like to say, he ate about half of what he cooked for himself, which gave him the Big Bob name, honestly. He weighed over 300 pounds, and he stood over 6'4". So we're talking about Big Bob Gibson with great food. Finally, somebody said, "Bob, quit working on the railroad and do barbecue full-time." A friend told him that, and the rest is history. He started a family barbecue restaurant that has now lasted over 100 years and 4 different generations of Gibsons that have worked there. He specialized in smoking pork, but also barbecued chicken. And again, Alabama's a town, especially northern Alabama, with a lot of chicken farms, a lot of chicken houses, and he cooked the chicken over hickory-fired brick, briquettes, hickory briquettes in an area that he would cook, and word spread of his southern flavors and his unique white barbecue sauce, which is made with vinegar and mayonnaise and some spices that nobody will tell me what they are, because if they tell me, they'll have to kill me. They say supposedly Bob never met a stranger. The tables were always full. The lines at the counter were always long with people placing orders. Some just wanted to hang out and talk to Big Bob, and the demand prompted him to initiate curb service. So they were one of the first barbecue restaurants in the state of Alabama that had curb service, where you could pull your car up. They would come out, car hop, take your order in your car, and bring your tray of your barbecue, and they would hook the tray to the side of your car, and you would eat the barbecue in your car, which I love. The famous Varsity restaurant we talked about in Atlanta, Georgia, had curb service with car hops, and I just love that. That was such a classic thing. As a little boy, to pull up to a restaurant and sit in the back seat and have them bring you your food, and you stayed in your car and you ate the food, was really, really kind of a classic, very Southern thing. And then the 1950s come along, and all 5 of Bob's children decide they want to be in the barbecue business. And so they spread their restaurants out throughout northern Alabama. That meant more demand to come to the mothership, meaning you had to have more pits. And so at that time, they had a single pit, which was a chimney on one end with brick walls surrounding a flat cooking grate. They would burn the hickory wood, a lot of hickory in northern Alabama, that was shoveled under the cooking grate, and that's where they would cook the chickens and the pork. Every day, the floor had to be shoveled out, to a depth of 2 feet and replaced with new, fresh clay to hold the heat. Again, people in Alabama think all sauces should be white because of Big Bob Gibson's. His chickens were split, seasoned, and laid open on a pit for 3.5 hours at 350 degrees. You could cook about 50 birds at a time, and then they would dip the birds into this vat of the white sauce, a tangy, peppery white sauce that was so good. And today you can buy the sauce. I mean, they sell the sauce in grocery stores throughout Alabama. They sell the sauce, I think, in about 8 states. They added a red sauce, but not until the 1990s. And folks, trust me, it's as good as the white sauce. And now they're very famous for their red sauce. They're also famous for competing in barbecue championships throughout the South. The most prestigious one we had talked about when we talked about Tennessee is the famous Memphis in May World Barbecue Championship. And they have won so many awards at that very famous barbecue competition. In 1998, their sauce was named the best sauce on the planet. They've won over 500 awards from the American Royal International Barbecue Sauce Contest. But Bob Gibson assures us that while they have a white sauce and a red sauce, they're not going to be making a blue sauce. Okay, so there won't be any red, white, and blue. But folks, there's nothing more American than Big Bob Gibson's barbecue chicken with white, tangy, peppery sauce. Again, their cooking team has now won championships, 10 state championships, 10 world championships with their pork, chicken, and beef products. They're fond of saying that at Big Bob Gibson's, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. And Big Bob started that, and his family has continued to do that. Big Bob Gibson's, the original Decatur, Alabama. Get the barbecue chicken with the white Alabama sauce. I have spent a lot of time in Alabama over the years. You know, I did a lot of work with the Southeastern Conference, and then later I had a chance to take some Gulf oil spill money. Remember the BP oil spill in the Gulf? We took that money and we bought a sponsorship of the Southeastern Conference for Gulf Shores and Orange Beach and made them a sponsor of the SEC. And we came up with an ad campaign called Gulf Shores Orange Beach, where SEC families come to play. I have taken some amazing trips to places like Muscle Shoals or Tuscaloosa or Auburn or Mobile. And through those trips, I've been able to find some really, really great restaurants. So today, here are my 3 from me from the great state of Alabama. I told you when we talked about Ohio earlier that my most favorite dish of all time was veal stuffed banana peppers with marinara sauce from Cleveland, Ohio, from Johnny's Cafe. All right, now I'm telling you today who my favorite chef in the world is. In the world. My favorite chef in the world is in Birmingham, Alabama. It's the great Frank Stitt. He originally had a restaurant there called the Highland Grill that was one of my favorite restaurants in the world. It closed at COVID and unfortunately never was reopened. But he has a couple of other great restaurants in Birmingham. One is a kind of a French casual place called Chez Fonfon. But he has an amazing Southern and Italian fusion place called Bottega. Frank can cook, y'all. His wife, Parties, is one of the wonderful hostesses. The staff works there for decades. It's just such a great place. Several years ago, right before COVID, in fact, in the fall of 2019, I went to a fundraiser for the Mike Slive Foundation. My friend Anna Slive runs that foundation that was named for her dad, the late, great Mike Slive, who was the commissioner of the Southeastern Conference. And that night, they had a live auction along with a silent auction, and one of the live auction items was a flight of 6 different champagnes married to 6 different dishes created by Frank Stitt at Bottega. And I told Charlotte, I'm getting this. And fortunately, I was able to win that auction. And then COVID hit. and all the restaurants shut down. And so I couldn't use it in 20, I couldn't use it in 21. But in 2022, I have this dinner for 6 with 6 champagnes and 6 dishes. And I took my good friend, the late Bill Battle, and his wife Mary, and my friends Rebecca and Rusty Reed, and we went to Bodega and had a basically 3.5-hour dinner of 6 champagnes and 6 classic dishes. That was one of the best meals of my life. Bodega, you got to go. I brought today one of my favorite cookbooks, which is the Frank Stitz Southern Table, Recipes and Gracious Traditions from the Highlands Bar and Grill. Who wrote the foreword to this book? Pat Conroy. Pat Conroy's favorite chef in the world also was Frank Stitt, and they were dear friends. There's some amazing recipes in this book. The Highland Grill, one of the great places. Can't go there because it's not open anymore, but Bodega is, and that's one of my 3 from me. I'm a big fan, as you know. We've talked repeatedly about meat in threes. In the March edition of my On the Road with Rick newsletter, which you can get absolutely free if you let me know what your email address is, we talk about some of the great meat in threes throughout the South. And one of my favorites is in Birmingham, Alabama. It's Nicky's West. Again, a Greek family started it in 1957. It's a big cafeteria line, like the classic cafeterias, and you go down, you pick your meat entree, and they probably have maybe 8 to 10 meat entrees every day. Get the fried chicken. Always get the fried chicken. They got fried catfish that's great. They got meatloaf that's great. They got chicken and dumplings that's great. Get the fried chicken. And then they have maybe 20 vegetables, and you'll pick 3 vegetables that you want. And then they have corn muffins, and then they have desserts. It's one of the great places, Nicky's West, Birmingham, Alabama. Got to go there. And then one of my favorite restaurants, seafood restaurants, is the classic Winsel's Oyster House in Mobile, Alabama. They invented a wonderful salad called a West Indies salad, which is crab meat in olive oil and a little bit of vinegar on greens. Trust me, the West Indies salad is phenomenal. They've also got great, fried and broiled seafood there. Winsel's Oyster House in Mobile. As always, I like to remind you that we have a great musical playlist each week, and Alabama's got some great songs because it's a great music town. Let's start with the classic Lynyrd Skynyrd, Sweet Home Alabama, one of the great, great songs of all time. We have Frank Sinatra singing the standard Stars Fell on Alabama, which is one of my favorite ballads. We've got the great Jimmy Buffett doing a cover of Rodney Crowell's great song, Stars on the Water. Great song, ends with later in Mobile, the stars on the water of Mobile Bay. It's a great song. You got to have a song by the great group Alabama. They're called Alabama. And we've got on this playlist the great classic My Home's in Alabama. And then there's a great John Prine song. That's one of my great favorite songs of all time and sung by one of my favorite singers of all time, Bonnie Raitt. It's the classic Angel from Montgomery. Wonderful song. Again, a great playlist. We only have 5 songs. It's hard to do all the great songs from Alabama. You could do things like, Midnight in Mobile by Alan Jackson, Muscle Shoals was famous for recording all these great artists. They had a white band, a house band called the Swampers. There's a legendary story that Wilson Pickett heard the Swampers and decided he wanted to come to Muscle Shoals and record some soul music songs. When he got there, he's like, well, where's the band? They go, well, that's the band. He goes, no, not those white guys. Where's the band? The black guys. And he goes, no, these are the guys. And then he played, and he goes, these are the guys. and he recorded a bunch of songs there. The Rolling Stones were not allowed to be recording songs in the United States because they didn't have the permits, but they recorded 3 songs secretly in Muscle Shoals. Brown Sugar was one, Wild Horses was another. Pretty neat story. And of course, Jimmy Buffett wrote a song called The Bama Breeze about during that trip, Mick Jagger comes to the famous Floribama bar, which sits on the half in Florida and half in Alabama in Orange Beach. And he signed his name on the bathroom stall, the women's bathroom stall on that particular trip. Aretha Franklin recorded in Muscle Shoals. A lot of just great music that came out of that. Remember the great song, Bob Seger's song, Bum, 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 Old Time Rock and Roll? Swampers. They recorded that song, Bob Seger, in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Great music, great food, great state. That's our wrap on the great state of Alabama. And we look forward to seeing you back here next week for state number 23, the state of Maine, on United Taste of America. We'll see you then.